What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. And today we are going to be tier ranking the NFL teams for the upcoming NFL year. Obviously, last year the Super Bowl champions were the Kansas City Chiefs, but some new teams have come out and they've really shown us all of the talent that they have, and they have potential to go far this year. There are also some teams that are in rebuild mode, and then there are some teams that are just not good at all. So here we have all the tiers that we're going to be using. We are ranking based on their capability. Without further ado, let's get started here. Okay, so the first thing we have are the Buffalo Bills. Over the course of the offseason, they've really kept their team consistent. They've done some minor signings, but overall the team is pretty similar. As far as their division goes, I do think they have a chance to contend for that division title. I think the Super Bowl window is closing for them. I think they've had their opportunities. They've just haven't been able to get over that hump. The defense is alright. Their offense is still going to be pretty good. So we will rank them in the wild card. I think their window is closing and they're going to have to figure it out. Next up on the list, we have the Miami Dolphins, who are coming off a very strong season. They obviously have gotten their new head coach, Mike McDaniel, and have found their quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa, who matches up well with their receiver, their number one receiver, Tyreek Hill. I think the offense that for this year it's gonna shine. Their defense is very underrated. They do have a very strong defense, and I do believe that they're one of the more well-rounded teams in the league. We're gonna put them in the conference tier. They have a very good team, and I think they will continue to shine next season. Next up, we have the New England Patriots, who are I think they are definitely in a rebuild mode. I think a lot of people can agree with that. With the drafting Drake May, getting a new head coach and Jerome Mayo, and getting a new offensive coordinator and Alex Van Pelt. I don't think they're really in any position to do anything significant. With that, we're replacing them in the tank tier. It's not really their fault. It's just kind of like the situation they're in. Next up, we have the New York Jets, who are obviously gonna get Aaron Rodgers back from injury. They're also got Mike Williams over the offseason. I think he's gonna be a really nice wide receiver one for that team, along with Garrett Wilson and others. I think that their defense is also really good. They have a really strong defense. They definitely have talent on that side of the ball too. They're a really young and scrappy team, so I think they're gonna do pretty well next season. All right, so for this reason, we are gonna put them in the wild card tier alongside the Bills. It's the AFC East. It's definitely gonna be an interesting division to watch. But next, we got an even more interesting division to talk about in the AFC North. So next up on the list, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Over the offseason, they've gotten Derrick Henry. That makes their running back room pretty talented. And with that, most of the team's been retained, but they did lose Patrick Queen, and he did go to the Steelers. So with that, I don't think it's gonna really have that much of an effect on the defense. I still think it's going to be very good. I think that they are definitely a Super Bowl contender. I personally think that the Ravens are the best team in the AFC besides Kansas City Chiefs. I think the Ravens are easily one of the best teams in the NFL, and for this reason, I think we should put them in the Super Bowl tier. I think they deserve to be there. I think they are easily Super Bowl contenders, and I don't think it's even a question. So now we got the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow's coming off an injury. He's gonna start ramping it up again. Joe Mixon has left the team, so that kind of leaves a question mark for their running back game. They have Zach Moss. He's willing to step up and take the job, but I don't think their running back is going to be anything spectacular, the running back room. I also think that their defense kind of needs some work. Their defense is okay, but I don't think it is nearly as strong as the other defenses in the division. For this reason, I think the Bengals belong in the wild card tier. And keep this in mind when we're talking about the AFC North. The AFC North is the toughest division in football. There are some big talent in that division, so I think it will be hard in general for the teams in that division to really have a striving division record, with the exception of the Baltimore Ravens. But I think all of the teams
in that division are gonna have a chance to win, but it's gonna be tough for them to be perfect in the division.
Next up, we have the Browns. Obviously, you have Deshaun Watson coming off an injury. There's still a lot of lingering questions about him, whether he's going to regain his form. You've also signed Tyler Huntley and James Winston for that backup quarterback role. The Browns have also gotten Jerry Jeudy. I think it will complement nicely with the other receivers that they have on the team. And then, that defense is going to be great. We all know that. The defense is going to be excellent. It's going to be probably the best in the league. So, that defense is probably going to win them a lot of their games. So I think they are definitely getting to that wild card spot. It's going to be, again, with that division, it's going to be hard for them to really get a big advantage over the other teams. Next up, you got the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've gotten Russell Wilson and Justin Fields to build up depth in their for their quarterback room. I think that they are very young and scrappy, and I think they are a pretty well rounded team. They obviously did lose Deontay Johnson. I think they'll be fine. I think they have enough talent in the receiving room. Their defense remains probably underrated defense, if I had to be honest. Again, the Steelers could definitely win the division just like all the other teams in the AFC North. With that, I think they're another wild card team. Next up, we have the Houston Texans, who are coming off a magical season. Um, they have retained everyone from the previous season. D'Amico Ryans, Coach Deere candidate. They've gotten Joe Mixon. That really makes their offense something special. Their defense is kind of middle of the tier, but I think that they're just going to get better because they're young, so they're going to learn.
I think mainly for their talent and for how their division's going to be, I think we're going to put them in the conference tier.
Next up, we got the Indianapolis Colts, coming off kind of a weird season with Anthony Richardson getting injured. You have kind of middle of the tier offense. I think Michael Pittman Jr. is kind of a good piece for that offense. I think the Colts are gonna struggle this year. I don't think they're gonna be horrific.
And for this reason, we are going to classify them in the average category. I think they still got some talent on that team that will carry them throughout the season.
Next up, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars. They obviously have just gotten Trevor Lawrence on a big contract. I think their offense is going to be pretty dangerous. I'm not really sure about their defense. Their defense is looking kind of, they're going to have a lot of good games with the offense. That's assuming Trevor Lawrence doesn't get injured.
I think the Jags will surprise a lot of people this year, and I definitely do think they have the capability of going pretty far this year. I'm going to put them into the wild card spot, and I think they have a chance of getting into the wild card this year.
Next up, we have the Tennessee Titans. They have Will Levis as their quarterback, but I think the rest of that offense leaves something to be desired. I think the Titans are the weak link in the AFC South. Their defense also leaves something to be desired. Obviously, over this offseason, they've gotten Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard, which does juice up the offense in that receiving and running back area. I don't think it's going to do much.
For this reason, the Titans will be below average this year. They won't necessarily tank to the degree of only having 1 or 2 wins, but they are going to struggle big time, and they will finish last in the AFC South.
Next up, we have the Denver Broncos. They are in a complete rebuild. There's not really a better way to put it. They're just in a complete rebuild. They got Bo Nix. They've lost a lot of their offense. On defense, they got Pat Surtain.
With the fallout with Russell Wilson and with Sean Payton not having a good relationship with him, I just think all the momentum for Denver is lost at this point. It's going to be tough for them to climb back in the AFC West, which still has some good talent, which we'll get into in a sec here. But I definitely think that the Broncos are going to be towards the bottom of the league, not necessarily because they lost a whole bunch of people, but just because they lost all the momentum. And for that reason, we will put them in the tank tier alongside the Patriots.
Next up, we got reigning Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, Mahomes and Kelsey. That you got that great duo, that 1-2 punch. I think the only thing that is in question is really their receiving core. I think it's a little. I think it's a little weak. I don't think it's very weak. I actually do think they have what it takes to have a good receiving core. I do think that they can definitely compete for that Super Bowl again.
I think keeping in mind that they have lost some receivers and the fact that now they're getting to the playoffs more, I think more teams are going to start to figure them out. And I think the Chiefs are going to struggle a little more this year than they did last year. I still think they are Super Bowl contenders. However, I think that it's going to be a little harder for them to get on those big winning streaks like they did last year. They are still Super Bowl contenders. However, I don't personally think they're going to be as good this year as they were last year.
Next up, you have the Las Vegas Raiders. The offense is definitely kind of weak. I don't think it's gonna really go anywhere. Their quarterback's a question. I don't think their head coaching is really that big of a concern. But their offense is really just gonna need work.
And because of this, I think the Raiders fall into the below average category. They might have a big win here and there, but I think overall they are gonna struggle this year.
Next up, you got the Los Angeles Chargers. They hired Jim Harbaugh, who's gonna bring a new look to the Chargers offense. You're getting Justin Herbert. With that, I think you have a real surprise team in the Chargers. No one's really talking about them that much, but I really do think that they're a surprise team, and they're really gonna catch a lot of teams off guard. I think with that, I think they definitely do. They could potentially sneak into a wild card spot. I think they're very underrated.
Next up are the Dallas Cowboys. We all know that the Dallas Cowboys are usually first round exits pretty much every single year. And I still think that Dak Prescott is going to be a good quarterback for them this year. They got some running back depth to add to their already pretty potent offense. I think the expectations for this year are definitely going to be higher than in years past. I think their defense is going to remain as good as they were last year. It's all going to depend on how far they can get in the playoffs. This is going to be an incredibly important season for Dallas as Dak Prescott is on his final year of his contract. We don't know what's going to happen after this year, but I think the Dallas Cowboys are really going to have to go far this year. I think for this reason, the Cowboys are going to remain a solid wild card contender. Next up are the New York Giants. There's not really much to talk about here. Daniel Jones is obviously coming back, but the Giants are in rebuild mode, and they've been in rebuild mode now for several years. For this reason, I think they're just going to tank. They've been like this for several years now. I think they're going to continue to really struggle in the league until they get someone from the draft that could really boost their team. Next up are the Philadelphia Eagles, another NFC East team. Now, there was no doubt that the Eagles' defense is not as good as they were hoping for. That defense for the Eagles last year was their breaking point. They couldn't play defense, especially against the teams that they should have won against. I think Jalen Hurts is under a lot of pressure this year to perform well, and if the offense doesn't perform well this year, this Eagles team is going to completely fall apart. This year is going to be a pressure year for them, and they're going to have to perform well. I think for this reason, they are definitely contenders with Dallas for the division. I think they are going to be a wild card team, but we will see what happens there. And after some further consideration, we are going to move Dallas to the conference. I think they are going to, in fact, make it to a conference finals of some sort. Next up is the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals are still in a rebuild mode, but it's going to be interesting to see how Kyler Murray is going to do returning from injury and how he's going to connect with Marvin Harrison Jr., who is a very talented receiver in college, and I think they got some great potential there. The rest of the team is looking a little bit shaky. I do think the defense is going to be a big question mark for them. I think from last year, I think the Cardinals are going to significantly improve, though. I think they are going to be a pretty below average team, but they're going to be better than they were last year. But that's part of a rebuild, but they're definitely going to be better this year than they were last year. Next, we got the Chicago Bears. Obviously, Justin Fields left the Chicago Bears, and they got Caleb Williams from the draft. They also got DeAndre Swift. And overall with that, I think they got some talent, but more so, I think the Bears are going to be a pretty average team this year. I think the coaching is going to be better than it was last year, but I think they're still going to struggle in their division. But they're not necessarily going to be below average like they were in the past 2 years. So I think they're going to be a pretty average team for this year. Next up, you got the Detroit Lions, and let me tell you, I think the Detroit Lions are going to be one of the best teams in the NFL this year. They are a really well rounded team. They got that potent offense with Jared Goff. Their defense is going to continue to play great. I truly think that the Lions are a conference contender, and there's no doubt about it. I think they could make a really deep run this year, even farther than they did last year. The Lions are going to be one of the teams to beat if it's not Baltimore. I think they got a great core, and they are going to continue to do great things. Next up are the Green Bay Packers. They obviously got a young and talented quarterback in Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love has really lifted this offense. They have a young core that has potential to do great things in the league and get back to the playoffs. However, I think a question mark is going to be how is this going to go for the defense? And I truly think they're talking about how the Packers are going to make it. I think the offense is definitely going to have some games where they really shine. But again, this is a young team, and I think they're going to struggle in some of the games just simply because of their age. I think they are going to be average this year, but don't be surprised if they win some big games against tough teams. I think they definitely had the potential to. Next up are the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings obviously drafted J.J. McCarthy. With J.J. McCarthy and that offense, they are definitely a team that is under the radar, but I think that they are a little underrated. They still got Justin Jefferson, who is a great receiver, and I still think that they have a chance. I'm not going to say that they're necessarily good enough to make it far into the playoffs, but they got a little bit of a chance, and for that reason, I'm going to put them in the average spot. They're not going to suck this year like people may think. Next up are the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Atlanta Falcons are definitely in the weirdest situation out of any other team in the league. They picked up Kirk Cousins, but they also drafted Michael Penix Jr., and that's going to be a really weird situation and how they're going to figure that out. I think obviously Kirk Cousins will take the starter spot, and then Michael will back up Kirk. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they piece together the players that they've already gotten. The Falcons are going to be really hard to rate. This is going to be maybe slightly controversial, but I think the Falcons are capable of going to a wild card game, even though last year they kind of performed a little under average. But I think the Falcons have a chance at the wild card spot, and that may be a hot take. Next up are the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, last year the Carolina Panthers had the worst record in the league. They almost went 0-16, but they didn't. And I think Carolina's going to need to forget about what happened last year. Last year was just tragic for them. With Bryce Young and Deontay Johnson, I do think their offense is going to be significantly better than they were last year, and I still think their defense is going to improve from last year with the addition of Jadeveon Clowney. For that reason, I am going to put them in the below average area. I think they're going to struggle, but I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as it was last year. Next up are the Washington Commanders. The Commanders last year were not all that great, and I think this year is really going to be around the same. They have arguably the worst defense in the league. Even with the addition of Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz on the offense, I just think that offense can't be saved with just those two players. And I think for that reason, the Commanders are going to tank this year. They're really going to struggle. They don't really have any leaders on that team. Next are the New Orleans Saints. The Saints last year came off of a pretty average year for how things have been going there. I would say that with Derek Carr in the quarterback room, I think they got a pretty good veteran, but I think they're just going to struggle even with the addition of Chase Young. I think they're more of an average team, not necessarily a talent issue, but with how people work together on that team. I just think the team is going to be a pretty average team. Not necessarily worst in the league, but also not necessarily good enough to make the playoffs. Next up are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. They had a really good year, and I definitely think the Buccaneers are an underrated team in the league. I think they could take a lot of people by surprise. I think the Bucs have one of the overall best offensive duos in the league, and I think that will continue to really help them out throughout next season. They are easily contenders with the Falcons. They will probably overtake the Falcons, and the Buccaneers will make it farther into the playoffs than they did last year. And for that reason, we are going to put them in the wild card spot. Next up are the Los Angeles Rams. I definitely think the Rams still have some talent on that team. They just got Tre'Davious White to complement their young core. They got Cooper Kupp still. I think that the Rams are going to be a surprise team for many. I think the Rams will make it farther than people expect. And for that reason, I think the Rams are going to make it to the wild card. I think the Rams are going to be way better than they were last year, and I think it's definitely going to be a team to look out for going forward. Next up are the San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers are still Super Bowl contenders, no doubt about it. I don't even really have to go into depth. They got a great offense, they got a great defense. It's looking really good all around. And they're still Super Bowl contenders up to this point.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Brandon Ayuk. Even if they were to go on without him, I think they would still go very far.
Next up are the Seattle Seahawks, who are a young team. They were kind of average last year. They had some great games last year with that young team. This is going to be a make or break year for Geno Smith. It'll decide whether the team can continue with or without him. The Seahawks are still a talented team. They got that young receiving core. The Seahawks still have some questions on that defense. Their defense didn't really pop out as much as other teams in the league, and I think they might struggle facing some of the teams in the league who are obviously way more talented than they are. And for that reason, I think they will have around 6 to 7 wins. I think they're going to be average this year. If they go average this year, I don't think they're going to go totally out on Geno Smith. But if they go anything below average, I think it might be time to get another quarterback.
And with that, that concludes our tier rankings of the NFL teams. Obviously, you can see there are a lot of wild card teams. They won't all necessarily make it, but I think they're all capable of making it. That goes with everyone on this list. The numbers might not be that realistic, but I think all these teams are capable of making it to that level, depending on where they are.
We still have lots of transactions to go through, so this could change by the start of the season.
Leave a like, subscribe.
If you guys have any thoughts about this list, be sure to drop them in the comments below. And we will see you guys on the next video. And yeah.